we dive in, there will be polls that will be put up on the screen, and you're encouraged to actively participate and engage with them. Now, let's begin. The global shift to clean energy is not just an environmental necessity, but it is a massive economic opportunity. However, significant gaps remain. You may want to ask what these gaps are, but I'll tell you. The first is the gender gap. According to the International Renewable Energy Agency in 2025, women currently represent only 32% of the renewable energy workforce, and they hold fewer than 20% of senior leadership roles globally. This is not all. There's still a youth gap. While the green economy is projected to create 30 million new jobs by 2030, a skills gap prevents many young people from accessing these high growth opportunities. Now, the burden is that women and youth in developing regions disproportionately bear the cost of energy poverty, from health risk associated with unclean cooking fuels to economic exclusion. This webinar is aimed at addressing these disparities by shifting the narrative from mere participation to leadership, ensuring that energy transition is equitable and, most importantly, inclusive. Nigeria's clean energy transition is not only a technical or economic shift, it is a governance, it is a workforce, it is an innovative transformation. And at the heart of this transformation are women and young people who will act not just as beneficiaries, but as leaders, innovators, and decision-making. Today, at this webinar, we will unpack how women and youth can influence climate governance, how women and youth are shaping Nigeria's clean tech ecosystem, and how we can prepare the next generation workforce for green jobs. We have an incredible lineup of speakers who are with us today, and they will be bringing global, national, and hands-on ecosystem experience. But before we begin, please attempt the poll that will be put up on the screen in a few seconds. Thank you. We'd like to get your inputs, and please go ahead and select an option. The poll will be on screen for about 30 seconds, and we'll proceed to share the results. Thank you. Interesting. What is the biggest thing slowing down clean energy in Nigeria? It's interesting to see that 53% of our audience today think low awareness of the concept of clean energy is the major barrier slowing down its adoption in Nigeria. 18% of our audience think people don't trust the product. 6% of our audience think government rules aren't enforced, and 24% of our audience think financing options rather are too hard. Interesting. Thank you for sharing your feedback with us. Like I mentioned earlier, we have an incredible lineup of speakers who will bring global, national, and hands-on ecosystem experience to the webinar today. Our speakers are Ava Strasser. Ava Strasser is a gender and youth analyst at Sustainable Energy for All, SE for All, where she leads initiatives advancing gender equality and youth inclusion in sustainable energy systems. She implements C for All's STEM traineeship program and worked to mainstream gender and youth considerations across energy policy and programming. Ava has also contributed to research on gender indicators for SDG 7, which is clean and affordable energy, and explored the intersection of gender, energy, and emerging technologies. Welcome, Ava. We are delighted to have you with us today. Ava, are you there?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I was waiting for my camera to turn on.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. Our
Great.
next speaker is Jennifer Anya. Jennifer Anya is a program associate at the Nigeria Off-Grid Market Acceleration Program, NOMAP, where she supports high-impact interventions in Nigeria's off-grid energy market. With a background in operations and maintenance across solar home systems, commercial and industrial projects, and mini grids, she brings hands-on experience from the field. Her work focuses on designing practical business models and enabling policy frameworks that translate reliable power into real economic outcomes for communities. Today, Jennifer will bring a practitioner's perspective to what sustainable energy access truly means in practice. Welcome, Jennifer. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi everyone, good morning. I hope we're all ready to listen and get an impactful conversation from this. Yeah.
Yes, we have. Thank you so much for joining. Our last speaker for today will be Kevin Okwako. Kevin Okwako is the Innovations Programs Manager at Jacobs Ladder Africa, where he designs and runs incubation programs supporting early stage enterprises in the green economy. With over a decade of entrepreneurial experience, he has worked closely with youth-led startups to refine business models and scale climate-smart solutions. He also mentors emerging entrepreneurs across Africa through programs such as the Tony Lumelu Entrepreneurship Program and Yali East Africa. Welcome, Kevin. Thank you for joining us today.
So much, Fukwe. Pleasure being here.
Kevin, are you? Oh, yeah. Thank you for joining us today. Okay. Our first speaker for today will be Eva Strasser, and she'll be walking us through amplifying voices in climate governance. Eva, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and we can jump into it. Okay. Perfect. And just checking, you can see it all right? Okay. Thanks, Kevin. All right. Hi, everyone. Excited to be with you today. As mentioned, my name is Ava
Right.
Strasser. I'm our gender and youth analyst here at Sustainable Energy for All. And we'll jump into a little bit more about what I do and what that means as we sort of explore this topic of amplifying voices in climate governance for, of course, CADEF's Women and Youth Leading the Energy Transition webinar. So I'm thrilled to be here today. I look forward to a great discussion around what it means to be in climate governance for women and youth, how this works specific to Nigeria, and also some of what SE for All does to amplify this topic. So give you a little bit of background about Sustainable Energy for All, our gender and youth program, sort of why I'm here, but first to dive into kind of an overarching idea of the importance of this topic. And so really what SE for All does is we place women and youth at the forefront of the energy transition. As mentioned, women hold only 32% of jobs in renewable energy, less than 20% of senior management roles. And you'll see this 30% number quite a bit. I think it comes up, you can see even a line down in advocacy, women's participation at COP28 was only 34%. So what we're seeing, right, is this lack of gender parity in the energy sector. Women-founded energy startups are receiving less than 3% of capital venture or venture capital. Very early morning over here. You'll have to forgive me if I make some mistakes. But hopefully that's why the slides are here. So cut me a little bit of slack, if you will. So we're seeing this funding gap, this representation gap, not only in the workforce, but also in advocacy, where it's projected that we'll reach gender parity at COP in 2043. Which is even beyond what our Sustainable Development Goals Agenda 2030 sets as a sort of, ideal deadline. And this exclusion is a huge missed opportunity because women yield more powerful returns when they're included, and diversity yields more powerful returns. So companies with more women on their boards are more likely to reduce energy consumption. They're more likely to lower their company's greenhouse gas emissions. They're also more likely to see a higher return on equity. So they're bringing in, more socio-environmental economic gains. Countries with more women in parliament who are, decision makers, who are leading climate governance, they're more likely to adopt stricter climate policies, including energy policies, and they're more likely to ratify environmental treaties. And so this is important stuff. To have women in the room is leading to better outcomes for profits, for the climate, for even just day-to-day activities that are energy intensive or that put off greenhouse gases. So closing the gender gap, we see it not just as an issue of equality, but also as a strategy for achieving sustainable, prosperous, equitable future for everyone. And so at SE for All, I'll kind of get into a bit more about how we do this, but really, we see women as people who are, yes, disproportionately negatively affected, but also, once they have opportunities for meaningful participation, they're the agents of change who are driving us towards a sustainable future. And this is really the same for youth who are a huge portion of the population. I myself kind of fall into this youth category, so I'm also really excited to talk about what this means for us. But there are 1.2 billion people who are between 15 to 24 worldwide. But not only that, there are 400 million young people, which is, a huge proportion of this population that are in Africa, and between 15 and 35 years old. And that's, key, right? You're getting out of high school, you're going into college, and then or maybe you're just headed straight into the workforce. And then from college or university, you're going into the workforce. So a really big population that's, thinking about these entry-level skills and entry-level jobs, and yet it's difficult to get them. So in 2025, we saw 262 million youth who are not in employment, education, or training, with higher rates among young women. So this is a major underrepresentation in the workforce. And not only that, but also we're seeing that we don't have the skills that are needed to supply the jobs that are in demand, those being the green jobs. And so really, if we want to capitalize on an energy transition, SE for All prioritizes bridging the skills gap so that we can really unlock the potential of our young energy leaders who are the future. So what is our gender and youth program? And I promise this all kind of relates to climate governance. I'll tie it all together. But just to give you an idea of what we do here at SE for All. So we have a few different pillars of our work. We do our gender and youth mainstreaming, which is where we take, gender and youth perspectives, lived experiences, research, data and evidence, and we really tie it into everything that we do at SE for All, whether that be policies that we're putting together, programs, country interventions. We embed these best practices to strengthen these outcomes. And really, it's all in pursuit of a just and equitable energy transition. And we'll have a few of these gender and youth mainstreaming tools for the energy sector specifically coming out. That'll be widely available shortly, and we'll be sure to sort of share them widely. So keep up with SC for all social medias if gender and youth mainstreaming and activities that you can do, yourselves or in your organization is something that you're interested in. We also do professional development, and I think this is where we really start to get into like what is climate governance and how can we prepare young people and women for climate governance roles. So we empower young people and women through our flagship programs, primarily through technical training, but also, business skills, regulatory skills, policy skills. How can we sort of embed women and youth into ongoing programs that SC for All is doing, which often include working with governments on policymaking. We do advocacy, so thinking about, right, how do we put women and youth at the forefront of talking about and making these decisions? And then we do data and evidence. So we build this evidence base, and that I'll come back to this, but the importance of sex disaggregated data and age disaggregated data truly cannot be understated, because that's what we're using to make decisions, not only about like programs and interventions, but also policy and importantly, investment. And so we work to enhance this database that exists and really, strengthen it. And so how do we do that? We have our sort of key programs. Let me see if I can, okay, there we go. We have our sort of key programs around Women in Clean Cooking, our STEM traineeship program, our Open Africa Power, just kind of letting you know, what's out there that we do, but also how this sort of relates. And this is importantly, what we're seeing is, right, for women, very much so a focus on mentorship and what it looks like to be mentored by leaders in the sector, because that we know improves entry, it improves retention, but also it improves advancement. So if we want women at sort of the echelons of governance and of business, we need to give them the support to get there. And then we look at things like our STEM traineeship program, Open Africa Power, energy planning training. These are all sort of these technical training programs that allow women and youth the opportunity to gain the skills, gain the knowledge that they need to participate. And I'll come back to this capacity building point as a sort of next step recommendation once I get to the end, because I think this, again, it goes with the sex disaggregated data. You're going to hear it a lot, but I think capacity building truly is something in this sector that we cannot, continue to overstate. Okay, let me see. Okay. Again, that advocacy piece, thinking about things like, bringing voices, high-level experiences, or bringing voices and experiences to high-level forums, really thinking about how we can, share women and youth voices at the highest levels so that they're influencing leadership, they're influencing policymaking, decision-making, negotiations. And, all of that sort of forms what is energy policy. And then, of course, and we'll get into what this means for Nigeria, but that data and evidence piece. So on the, I don't know if you can see my scrolling. It doesn't matter either way, I'll tell you. On the far right, the last three are sort of energy transition and investment plans that we've embedded gender and youth into. And so it looks like, they do a lot of job projections. So what kind of jobs will be available from women and youth as, the sector progresses towards net zero goals or their green growth goals? What kind of, opportunities exist, what national frameworks are already in place, and that's sort of what we're gonna get into talking about today when it comes to Nigeria. So why women and youth in Nigeria's governance? When you look at Nigeria, right, I think they're really mimicking some of the trends that we see. Again, I told you we're coming back to this 30% number. But what we're seeing is that while women are central energy users, they're energy managers, they're deciders in households, especially around things like cooking, lighting, domestic tasks that are really energy intensive, they're remaining underrepresented in energy leadership and policy forums. So women comprise 33% of Nigeria's renewable energy workforce, which I think you'll note is 1% better than, the sort of global rate, but also only 1% better than the global rate, which I think says quite a bit, right? And they're mostly concentrated, importantly, in non-STEM, non-technical, administrative, roles rather than these sort of higher income, higher influence, technical or decision-making leadership roles. And so, that's not a great position to be in if we want women to lead on climate governance. When we think about, the global sort of averages as well, right? Only, I think it's 11% are, energy ministers are women. And so when you're thinking about numbers like this, it's not, necessarily as promising as one would hope. And then youth make up the majority of Nigeria's population. Super importantly, thinking about the fact that 60% of Nigerians are under the age of 25, which means that these are the Nigerians that are entering the workforce. They are, the ones that have to live the longest with the climate and energy choices and policies and programs that we make and implement today, or that we don't make and don't implement today. And so not only is clean energy a way for youths to, have jobs, to innovate, to promote socioeconomic growth in their countries, but it's also an opportunity to engage as activists, which can't be understated. But I think a lot of the times, right, what we're seeing is that youth are really these grassroots activists. They're advocates for the cause. They're on social media. They're, leading conversations in their communities. And that's not translating necessarily into being co-designers of policy. So we're talking about what we need. We're, broadcasting widely, but it's not necessarily coming to those boardrooms that are making decisions, or importantly, those, rooms where policy decisions are being made. And so in Nigeria, I think there's a lot of opportunity to sort of build its just and energy transition by hinging this on women and youth as co-creators of policies, financing instruments, investments, accountability mechanisms, these areas that really women and youth have been underrepresented. And then to look a little bit at sort of the national context, right? Nigeria has adopted over 10 policies on renewable energy that mainstream gender and youth since 2001. I've got some, examples, but I think importantly, what we're seeing is that a lot of these policies do have reference towards women and youth in decision making. Nigeria's got a framework for women and youth in their energy governance. Their National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change aims to ensure women and youth participate in and benefit from climate and energy policy, which includes decision making. I mean, in this policy's introduction, they recognize this isn't happening as much as it should, and then they've got a sort of commitment that they make in there to increase their meaningful participation. The energy transition plan, and we'll get into SE for All's role in this, but it projects 840,000 jobs if we follow a 2016 net zero path. And so, I mean, those jobs range from entry level to leadership. So we're going to need people to fill them. The nationally determined contribution, what we're seeing is that, quite a lot of them don't have reference to gender and youth globally, but Nigeria's does. And it also has a sort of implementation strategy. And there's the regional, and there's the African Union and the ECOWAS and these kind of regional organizations that Nigeria belongs to, and they're also thinking about women and youth and energy governance. I put down the Maputo Protocol, which commits to 50% gender responsive energy projects by that's supposed to say 2030 and 100% by 2050, and so that's a typo on my part. But what we're seeing, right, is this all to sort of say Nigeria has made really significant progress in their policy development, but there is further opportunity to strengthen implementation, to enhance ownership and awareness among stakeholders, whether they be in government, in communities, but also to advance accountability through the implementation and the monitoring frameworks and strategies that come with policies like these. So this to say, an amazing, framework in place. I mean, over 10 policies on renewable energy with gender mainstreaming and youth mainstreaming. It's not insignificant. And once we're sort of empowered with this knowledge, and I mean, I invite everyone here, whether you're Nigerian or not, to take ownership over the energy policies in your country, because we are sort of the push for accountability as well. And so again, we sort of talked about, right, a lot of women and youth find themselves being activists, advocates, but it's not necessarily translating into their sort of decision-making roles. And so CADEF asked, can we explore what mechanisms already exist and then what we need to do? So that's what we'll dive into next. So what mechanisms already exist? And in Nigeria, there's a few that I've put as sort of these really strong examples of government action, of civil society action, of women and youth who are influencing decision making, who are moving from activism, advocacy into direct action, to shape policies and to shape decision making. And so the first and the third, the Green Women's Platform and the Nigerian Youth Parliament, those are sort of government initiatives providing these formal platforms where women, for the first, of course, can feed into national frameworks. And then Nigerian Youth Parliament, where youth can feed into the frameworks. And I think excitingly about the Nigerian Youth Parliament, right, is that there's a quota for how many women should be nominated by your country. And we see really strong success with quotas. I think, sometimes people say, oh, they don't work, oh, they do work. I did some fun research on post-conflict countries and whether quotas work to do some peace building and reconstruction and, advance sustainable development. And what we found is that they do work in those contexts. And I'm not saying, everything's a conflict context, but I am saying from a peace building lens, right, it's an exciting opportunity to see because we all sort of need communities that are more peaceful and more equitable and more sustainable. And so when we see things like a women's quota, it's exciting. It's a good mechanism to get more women and young women, that is, into the sector and into these decision-making spaces. So Green Women Platform, a way to feed into these policies beyond project implementation, and Nigerian Youth Parliament, a way for youth to gather knowledge, to collectively amplify their voices for national conversations. And then the second and fourth are examples of some really strong, civil society action and where civil society is playing a role. And when we look at things like the National Climate or the National Action Plan on Climate and Gender, what we're seeing is that these conversations are being shaped by civil society. And generally, we see this, quite a bit globally, but super exciting to see in this context as well, right, where you're having voices of women in CSOs who are being consulted and who are actively shaping these policies and saying, wait, we need more representation of women and youth in negotiations and government and delegations. And then the Nigeria Youth SDGs Network, which SC for All has worked with in the past and are a super great opportunity for any of you who are interested in getting more involved in your country and in decision making. But again, it's a way for civil society to unite and to call for what they want. They, our network across the 36 states in Nigeria, and they do youth consultations that feed into these policies and these platforms. And so not only, is it our mechanisms, right, just civil society or just government, but even at the individual level, right, you can be consulted, and that can kind of feed into these higher sort of overarching frameworks. What do we do in Nigeria, to turn it back a little bit to SC for All? And how do we, sort of think about women and youth in decision making? I spoke briefly about Nigeria's energy transition plan, but it was developed by the government of Nigeria and SC for All, and commits to delivering on SDG 7. And again, we looked at, job projections and job creation. And when we're thinking about job creation, and we're also thinking about the high youth unemployment rates and the number of jobs that we're going to need to fill and who is going to have those skills, that's youth, and that's, women, and that's moving from women and youth in informal sectors where maybe they're not protected or the workforce doesn't necessarily account for them into these technical roles or these leadership roles in the workforce that are being created by the energy transition. We have our Nigeria Energy Transition Office, which is supporting investment, promoting policy action. The National Energy Compact, which is linked to M300, recognizes, again, that job creation. When you see things like job creation and policies and income opportunities, I think that kind of keys you in that there's an opportunity for women and youth, even if it's not explicitly stated, right? That's something that you can grab onto. And again, that's that ownership part. Take ownership of the job creation commitments. Because once they're created, right, who's going to fill them? And then it also commits to clean cooking access, which it directly sort of calls out this particular benefit to women and youth, or to women in marginalized communities. Our universal energy facility, you can kind of see on the right, but it's a result-based financing, and it offers financing to renewable energy companies. And it also has some gender responsive approaches. And I mean, you can see how that's sort of working in a little mini case study, but on the right is 19 clean energy uh, developers who have received funds. And you can see quite a few of them, are women. And that's an exciting picture to sort of see. The picture's much larger and there's a lot more women, but it's an exciting sort of case study, right? And finally, our ongoing gender and youth programs that we sort of talked about at the beginning and what it looks like to build capacity, and to build an understanding of how to lead governance. And then just to think about, right, moving from advocacy to sustained policy influence and what does, empowering women in leadership and advancing youth inclusion, not only in Nigeria, but I think these are pretty general to what the energy sector is seeing that we need as a whole. Starting with, again, that sex disaggregated data piece, to identify participation and investment challenges, driving data-driven accountability, having this evidence base for advocacy and policymaking that really goes to show the contributions of women and youth and what we need them for. And we kind of saw it at the beginning, but we need them for quite a lot. And then moving from this gender blind to gender responsive policy and financing measures, integrating women and youth into the whole of the renewable energy value chain and removing quite a lot of the regulatory and financial barriers to socioeconomic participation. So there are quite a few legal barriers from, not owning land, not owning credit, not, going to school, which is, comes from, maybe there's no support for STEM in a community for women and girls. And so really thinking about these socioeconomic policy barriers that are limiting participation. Enhancing capacity building. Again, I feel like I'm harping on capacity building, but I don't know that we can say it enough. But really ensuring that women and youth are trained as entrepreneurs, as policymakers, giving them the skills that they need for governance. And then finally, again, shifting to advocacy to women and youth, really leveraging these government mechanisms, as well as the grassroots initiatives that they're already leading, to ensure the co-design of programs and policies. And finally, I think that this quote, and I brought up the Nigeria Youth SDGs organization, and now I'm kind of quoting a great colleague in the sector, Joshua Lade, who's their executive director, but he really underscores, right, why we need financing, why we need the resources and the education access. And I think, we know that the road to 2030 and beyond is paved with our actions, our innovations, and our voices. Young Nigerians are transforming communities and driving progress. And I think that's a great place to sort of leave you at as we think about, what does it mean to amplify women and youth in climate governance, specifically also the energy sector, to really think about how we can start to drive this conversation. So thank you so much. I will pass it back to you. That's all from my side at the moment, and happy to return to this conversation as we get further into the webinar this morning. Thanks. I think you might be muted.
Oh, yes, sorry. I didn't know I was muted. Thank you so much, Ava. Thank you for that powerful framing and for reminding us that a just and equitable energy transition requires women and youth to not just be spectators on the sidelines, but also be active key players and co-creators of policies, of investments, and even of accountability mechanisms. Thank you once again, Ava. Moving on, we will be listening to our second speaker. Our second speaker is Jennifer Anya, and she will unpack how women and youth are building the next wave of clean tech. How women and youth are building the next wave of clean tech. Jennifer, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Eva, for setting the ground running. You did a very great work with sort of setting the tone and sort of leading us as to what we currently have on ground, as to what the policies that are existing are, and even what the provisions are in those policies for youth and for women. And right after that, I will then take us down to who are the innovators and who are the key players in the sector with regards to clean energy access specific to women and youth. So give me a minute while I share my screen. Yes. Please confirm you can see my screen. Great. So before we go right into the conversation proper, before we go into the conversation proper, I would like to sort of understand what we think and where our minds are. So I sort of have a very quick question. And it's not a tick yes or no. So I'm going to need a little bit of some writing effort from you to sort of understand. I want to understand what you think your own challenge is, or what you think the challenge is with limiting women, or what do you think the challenge is limiting women and youth with regards to energy access in Nigeria? So please, while I move around and sort of get myself situated, please share your thoughts and opinions, because at the end of the day, this kind of conversations or this kind of thoughts or your perspectives help in shaping what the next line of thought or what the next line of innovative publishes or would I say outcomes will most likely be for everybody. So your inputs are most welcome. Thank you very much. I think I'll just pause a little bit to allow the moderator project what the responses are. We can maybe say end that in another, say, 5 seconds from now.
You're speaking.
Great. So please, can you share what the responses are? Because I'd like to also know, and I'm sure everybody here would like to see that. Give me a minute. Do we have the response up?
We do not have any responses yet.
Okay, good. So while
The poll
that is
is
still
up on the
coming,
screen.
I will come again. What did you say? You were saying something. What did you say? Confirm you can hear me because I don't know that I can't hear you if you're speaking.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm just.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much.
Can
The
you hear
responses
me?
are coming in. Yeah, that's helpful. Okay, so back to the conversation of women and youth building Nigeria's energy tech future. The conversation is we are moving from fossil fuels to a lot more advanced and cleaner energy solution. But then the question you ask yourself is who is designing all of this? If indeed you need to move from what we currently use to from what we were before to what needs to then be done. The next question is who are designing these technologies and who are the ones that designing these energy transition processes. And with that begs the next question of why this is very important and why this moment matters. Of course, like we had earlier mentioned, energy access is growing at a very increasing rate. We have different types of, say, power systems available suited to what the niche is for what you're creating them for. which could be mini grids, solar home systems, clean cooking solutions, and this could also be catered to different communities. So having said all of these things, I'm going to take a pause to sort of introduce myself and where I work, which is sort of in line with what we're currently talking about. So my name is Jennifer Aya. I would say that I currently work as a consultant in the development sector regards to energy access. Prior to that, I used to manage and operate power systems. I used to manage and operate mini grid solutions, solar home system solutions, and slightly little bit of clean cooking because they did have an intersection with these clean cooking systems. So with that, and currently I work with NOMAP. NOMAP is short for Nigeria Off-Grid Markets Acceleration Program. Initially, we were co-created by Shell Foundation, USAID, and supported by FCDU to sort of curb some of the market barriers with regards to scaling energy access in Nigeria. So we have, so these were created in specific African regions. We have one in East Africa, then there's also another one in Nigeria, which is called the Nigeria Off-Grid Market Acceleration Program. Right, and I sort of oversee all of the work that we do with regards to energy access, which is very heavy on productive use. Productive use in this sense refers to, take for example, you build a power system in a local community or in a rural, well, it could be rural as well. It could also be off-grid communities. So to an extent, you always have to spur up economic activity in these locations. And so how do you do that? You end up, say, situating productive use assets in these locations. By productive use, you're referring to assets that would spur up economic development in these locations, right? And having said that, so with regards to energy transition, how do we think about it? We're not just building systems to just provide electrification. We are building systems that would power productivity in the communities as well. And like Eva had earlier mentioned, 60% of Nigeria's youth is made up of youths under 25. Right. And when you're building these things and when you're building these assets, you're not just building systems that are you need to sort of take everybody into cognizance, right? Women are involved, the youth are involved, every other person is involved. And when you're designing them as well, you also need to design them with the thinking that for the most part, the people that would pay attention and will use this product need to have a full understanding. I probably would not have any issues with regards to using them. And I always like to tell women-centered design with a story perspective. So while I was still operating and maintaining mini grid systems, one of the tasks that I had at the time was to sort of grow customer connection. So the engineering team will sort of install their systems, and then the operations team will make sure that the systems are operating at optimal performance, right? So one of those days I'd gone to site to do my regular check-ins, and I'd seen that the engineering team that had connected systems to the houses did not connect the kitchen. I'm sure you know that, say, sometimes in most of these really big households, in most off-grid and rural centers, the kitchens are typically away from where the general living is. So while I was doing my running arounds and just checking to see how connections were being done, I realized that I'd gone past 5 houses and seen that the kitchens were still in darkness, whilst the living room, there was power there. The walkway to the house, there was power there, but then the kitchen was isolated. And I was asking questions as to why did you not connect the kitchen? And then the husband of the house, or rather my engineer, would tell me that, that the man of the house or the husband said, that it wasn't important. Right. And for me, it didn't make any sense because this is literally where all the food that you eat comes from. And then I had to make my team redo all the entire redesign, and then we sort of connected the houses or the kitchen. And for me, the most important issue there was, or the most important thing I'd done at the time was, okay, for me, whilst connecting houses at this particular point, the kitchen is the most important thing right now. If the kitchen is not connected, nothing in the house is connected. What that then meant for even the women and the kids was women were able to stay longer at their shops to sell a bit more. Women were able to come back home and cook without having to need consuming, or would I say disruptive cooking fuels for them to be able to see to do their basic cooking that they needed to do. And that also then had an impact in the husbands and also the children, because children were then able to do their work appropriately. They were not necessarily needing to come back and then wait for their mothers to sort of do certain things for them. So one thing we then realized, or one thing I have learned from all of this, is when you don't take into consideration the women in designing systems or designing assets, you end up realizing that they end up having issues, or they end up not being included in whatever it is that you're designing, which ends up being a system that sort of lacks the main reason for what it was designed in the first place. So having mentioned energy access and mentioned the fact that it needs to be youth-driven, and then we then realized that Nigeria is currently at the crossroad where there's the climate action and there's the market transformation. So how do we do all of these things? How do we make sure that we're designing systems that take into consideration the fact that we need to grow our economy, the fact that we also need to sort of improve youth adoption, the fact that we need to make sure that women are also being placed in the forefront of these designs. That is what we then go into the next slide. With this, I will be highlighting some of the women leaders that we have seen and have sort of done really, really great job in sort of doing in designing systems that have catered to women and also catered to the economy in general. There's someone called Rita Idehai rather. She's the co-founder of EcoBata. Essentially, EcoBata was created to sort of enable or to sort of solve for one of the biggest problems in Nigeria. We drink water, we have our snacks, or we have our pet drinks, and they all come in these very small pet bottles, or maybe say a 50 cl or a 35 cl. The question is, when you're done drinking, what happens to these bottles? How do you toss them? You can toss them in the trash, but the question is, what happens after they're being tossed in the trash? When they're being picked up, when the garbage is being picked up, what happens to those bottles? So she created a company that does like a reverse vending machine for recyclable waste. So you go to the designated points where these assets are being situated, or where these machines are being situated. You put in your bottles or your recyclable bottles in there, and then you exchange it for cash, which is very innovative at this point. Everybody is sort of looking for where to get quick cash. This could be a spot. I know that in my own building, I could go through 5 packs of 50 cl water in maybe say 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So you can imagine how good this does for the environment and also for my own pocket. Right. There's somebody Simisola Shubowale, who is also a leader at Averia Lights. One of the issues that we've come to see in Nigeria in designing systems is that most times we design systems without taking into consideration the people that need the system itself. So Averia Lights has come in to sort of bridge that gap between just building systems for the sake of building them, sort of take up the money, but then building systems, putting the recipients of the system at the forefront of what they're doing. Right. So like I earlier said, with regards to EcoBata, the problem was poor waste management, plastic pollution, and then a lost economic value in discarded materials. And then like I earlier mentioned, she designed a platform where you can sort of exchange your PET bottles for cash, right? How does this impact the economy, you might ask? You realize that I know that the Waste Management Authority in Nigeria is doing a very, very great job, which we must definitely applaud them for. But then there's always the point of, also relying on the government to do every single thing that you know that you can even do in your own power. So if you know that you can create something to sort of solve for what some of these problems are, great. So she creates some circular economic model that keeps recyclables in the economy. So you drink the bottle, she upcycles them into something different. I'm sure you must have seen certain bags or certain shoes that probably have been made from PET bottles that have been upcycled into something a bit more useful for the economy. I'd also talked about Averia Light earlier before. Takes into consideration people-centered design when she's designing for her own systems. some of the impacts that we have here are the fact that when you design systems like this, you realize that there's a very big concern, or there's a very big leveling on community ownership. And like I would always say, I worked on the field for probably maybe say more than 5 years of my life at some point, and I always have stories to tell. There was one of those days where we had designed our systems and we were done with our work. So because the systems are situated in very off-grid locations, you almost don't find places to stay. So we design systems, or we build our systems there, and then we always have to go back to maybe say the city center to go sleep. And then the next day we are back again on the road, back to where our system is being deployed being deployed. One of these days we were done working and we were already on our way back to the city center, and we got a call back from the village, or where the community, from the community, and they were asking questions to say, I thought you guys had left. So we are still seeing your vehicle around the corner. We had seen a vehicle around the corner and somebody trying to access the power system site. And I was asking my colleagues, do we still have anybody on site? They're like, no, that there's nobody on site. So who is this person? So having heard that this person is not from our own team, they just automatically thought the person was a thief. And then they had sort of pinned down the person after beats and asking questions. So we then had to drive back to site. But that sort of taught me a lesson to know that if you don't build systems around people, when you have issues, nobody pretty much comes for you. When the system itself is not catering to the needs of the people that they are being designed for, the system won't exactly last for more than what they are being designed for. Take, for instance, a regular power system or a mini grid system or solar home systems. The solar panels alone last for 25 years. The batteries can do 5 or 10, depending on how long you're designing them for. So you can imagine you have sort of, and somebody speaking. Imagine if you have, say, sort of spent $50,000 to sort of design a power system, and then in 3 years, 4 years, those systems are going to shit because of the fact that you were not exactly designing for the people that they were being created for. Aside from the two that I had earlier mentioned, there are other tech innovators that or there are other clean tech innovators that we have in the room as well. And let's not forget that when we talk about energy access, we're not just referring to electricity. Electricity is all encompassing. It sort of favors every single sector in an economy that desires development in any way. Take, for example, agriculture, right? If you don't have the necessary processing facilities to be able to sort of mill your assets, electricity to be able to at least mill your goods, there's just no how that you'll be able to get something good out of it. Having said that, I would like to sort of say spotlight a couple of these other innovators as well. There's someone here called Chinwe Udo Davis. She's the founder of Into Solar. Take, for example, I would sort of describe this as we have 36 states in Nigeria, and not every single state in Nigeria is a port or has a delivery ground to receive say solar panels, or say some of the assets that we use in designing these systems. And because of how far-reaching that they are, sometimes we don't even have the experience of people to sort of build out things like this. I'm from Abia State, and take, for example, I need to sort of install power systems in Abia State today. I'm not exactly sure that I can trust a regular electrician in Abia State to install my solar panels for me. So what Chinwe has done in this regard is Chinwe has pulled together some form of platform that have aggregated, where she has trained solar installers across all the states in Nigeria and put them on a platform. So I take, for example, I as a company now, I'm going into Abia State to build a solar system. I don't need to go with all my team members. Maybe I can go with my head of engineering, and I can then go on the platform and then hire somebody from Abia State that has the necessary descriptions that I need, having gone through the test under her own organization, which is pretty awesome, I would say, because you don't necessarily need to sort of travel with all of your team. So it reduces the cost, it reduces expenses, and it reduces timing as well, because by the time you move all of the asset down there, all of the people down there, you're sort of wasting time, you're sort of falling short of what you need to do. There's someone also here who is also the founder of Pharmatrix. Like I'd earlier mentioned before, we're not restricting energy access here to just electricity and bulbs that form part of what we need to get our lives moving. It's all encompassing to other sectors. And here I would like to spotlight Ogechi. Ogechi has created a company where she has sort of found a way to use digital asset tools to improve climate resilience among smallholder farmers, right? And I always like to spotlight agriculture as a mainstay or as one of the tipping points or as some of us, or as a sector that benefits highly from energy access. Take, for example, you build a mini grid because all of the food that me and you eat today is gotten from most rural communities in Nigeria. There's nowhere you go to in Lagos today where you have 50 hectares of land where you're farming rice. You don't get that. There's nowhere you go to today in Abuja where you have, say, 70 hectares of land where you're farming potatoes. But you can go outskirts of Nasarawa and you can see those farmlands over there. But then how are those things processed, right? What are some of the machines that you need to be able to mill some of these things? Take, for example, at NOMAP, what we then did was we worked with a lot of mini-grid developers to say, okay, fine. Since you already have mini-grid sites existing in these agrarian communities, how about we fund you to build processing facilities in these communities, and then you process the raw materials or the food produce from the community members, and then you off-take it to the final buyer. So these are some of the ways you can think of nexuses between energy access and other things. There's a nexus between energy access and fashion, right? Where you don't have to necessarily always think of having to, say, refine your wool by yourself. There's a machine that does all of those things for you. So it's about you being creative enough to think out of the box. Next on my list here is Habiba Ali. Habiba Ali is one of the very big pioneers of energy access in the sector and a very big champion for gender inclusion. With Habiba, hers is very unique because she doesn't exactly go to the city center. She goes to the deep parts of the communities, the place where you don't think that are even accessible by roads or by anything. And she's created very unique solutions in the sense that in most villages, how do they dry tomatoes? How do they dry peppers? How do they dry basic food condiments? It's typically on the floor. I'm sure me and you have, maybe some of us are living this other part of the world. We've probably driven past some certain parts of town and we see food produced on the ground that are being sun-dried. Those things are open to contamination from even basic dust, maybe pests or whatever the case may be. But she has designed certain solutions that can dry food produced this way in cleaner and more hygiene methods, and also created some form of clean cook stoves as well for women in some of these areas, and also water filtration. So the thing is, and I'm not exactly dissing the men to say that men don't think about this, but on a regular day, a man is most likely just thinking about how he can make more money and put more money on the table of the people that he works with, or the people that he caters to at home. But the woman in this regard is thinking of, okay, how can I make sure that the food that I eat is being cleaned out in the right way? How can I make sure that even the water that me and my family members are drinking is even done the right way, and even clean cook stoves as well? So these are some of the things that I say that if we don't exactly put women at the forefront, we would not be doing the right thing. So if you ask me what makes their own solutions different, as like I earlier said, there's a multi-thinking purpose around the things that they do, right? They're not just thinking for themselves. There's always that thought of, because of the fact that they are the ones that sort of go through the brunt of having to do all of the work by themselves and understanding. Because take, for example, like the engineer that I had used, it wasn't his business. All he catered for was, oh, there's light, there's power, I've connected this particular house, and it's done and it's good to go. But the moment I went on site, I was more particular about the women that were cooking and the women that were catering to their kids. And I was like, oh, why is there no power in the kitchen? I don't think that the men, well, in this regard, the men did not exactly think of it in that light until I came on set and then I saw these things. So this is an example of designing for multi-purpose thinking, where you're not just thinking and you're not just doing things for the sake of just doing it. We design for affordability as well. You can see the case with EcoBata, where it's a pay as you, it's a drop as you earn model, where you just go, you drop the pet bottles in there, you get the money back, as opposed to maybe say other models that probably would exist in the market. There's the multi-purpose thinking, and I'm going to use Habiba Ali of Society to sort of highlight this, where she did not just think of just putting power system. Take mind you, she has a power company where she sort of installs power systems, but she's gone ahead of that and done multiple things because of the fact that she knows what the pain is to cook in the kitchen and then your eyes are burning from the soot that comes out of that. She knows what it feels like to be able to sort of cook food and then spread your produce on the ground for it to dry up. So I don't think that if we are not in this position where we are sort of feeling all of these burns, we would not think of something that sort of caters to some of those problems that we have. And the thing is, by the time we do all of this thing, there's a little bit of trust and distribution that sort of comes with it. You see that women are the ones selling to women, we are the one making enough more rich. I'm sure that if you go to the bank today and ask some of the bank workers, those in the sales team to say, who are some of your, if you do like some, maybe say gender mapping of some sorts, who are some of your leads that bring in the most money to the bank? I dare say they might say that the answers are women, because women do trust women better than the men do trust themselves, right? So, and we also do have a way of getting to more people because we are a bit more, we have a bit more empathy towards us. And one thing that I like to highlight with regards to clean cooking in this regard is that, having mentioned that Nigeria makes up about, say, 60% of the youth under 25, how about for clean cooking? We champion clean cooking through the youth. For every single household in Nigeria, there's at least two or three youths. At least the basic household in Nigeria have at least 4 kids. With 4 of those kids, maybe say 2 people are still maybe are under the age of say 25 or so, right? And if we use that, if you go by that, if you champion clean cooking through the youth networks, how do you think the adoption would spread? If you ask me, I dare say it would spread a lot faster because there's for every single household, there is a youth in there, and for every single youth that is in there, there's a woman in there, right? So, and by the time you start championing some of these things through that method, you see that you have faster adoption within community members. And of course,
So sorry to interrupt you, Jennifer. Oh, we are way past the time. We have the poll results ready.
okay.
Can I share them so you can speak to the results?
Oh, yes, please.
Oh, thank you. Can you see the result?
Yes, I can. So my question was, in your experience, what challenge is most limiting for women and youth in energy? For the most, which is quite interesting, most of the results here says mentorship and technical support. Second on the list is access to finance. There's a little bit on policy awareness and regulatory clarity. So mentorship and technical support and access to finance, which is very important to mention. But then the question, it'll be good to sort of dissect this a little bit more. And this also speaks to some of the work or some of what Eva had earlier mentioned when she talked about capacity building, right? Because a lot of times you realize that some of the work or some of the buildings or some of the networks or technical support that are being created are mostly always men-centered or very heavy on technical words. A lot of, say, finance, for lack of a better maybe say gibberish in there, that women are, you'll find maybe say less women in the finance sector, but then because of the fact that they are creating, would I say, products to sort of solve for some of the problems that we have today. We are then having to sort of start from the beginning again, sort of understand what this finance linguas of vocabularies are. So, and you realize that there are not a lot of them that even cater to just women alone. There are for the ones that you find in the market are catered to both women and men. And by the time you mix both women and men together in a group, you realize that the men are going a bit more faster than the women, right? So I would say take a step back, create a bit more mentorship and technical support catered to women alone. allow them express themselves and say whatever it is that they want to say. And like I would always say, everybody learns. I'm not a finance expert, right? I worked in operations and maintenance, but I'm an economics major, but I had to read and learn about myself. Access to finance, I believe that every single person sort of experiences this, but I dare say that there needs to be a bit more bias to women as well, because we have seen from experience that when we create products and create processes, they're a bit more they're a bit more welcome to the community better than the way that our other counterparts have done that. So this is helpful. Thank you for responding to the poll, and I dare say that this will most likely go into some of the responses or some of the co-creations that will be done out of this. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you, especially for spotlighting design thinking and for the expose on the roles of women and youth in leading the clean energy transition. Thank you. Our last speaker for today is Kevin Okwako, and he'll be taking us through how we can prepare the next generation workforce for green jobs. Kevin, we look forward to your insights. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kwe. I think I've learned quite a bit from the first two presentations. Thank you, Eva, for just showing us, from a global perspective, the need to have more women in decision-making positions. But I also love the examples Jennifer was sharing. It really brought out the need to have women in the design. So my part today, I'll share a bit from a perspective of where I sit. So I am the Innovation Programs Manager at Jacobs Ladder Africa. And on a day-to-day, I work with the youth and women in just coming up with ideas for the green economy, to come up with solutions to different climate change issues, and help them make businesses from them. And so in the context of this talk, I thought just to bring out ways we think through when you're coming up with ideas and how to spot opportunities, because my session is just how to think through opportunities. And I'll give you 3 frames of how we tend to think of opportunities, and where probably as you're designing the next thing, or you're thinking through what skills you need to get, or you're thinking through what innovations to come up with, I'm hoping this frames will help you come up with something, whether it's from gaining new knowledge, coming up with an innovation, influencing policy that will be effective, both Nigeria and Africa as a whole. So I'll start with one thing we normally say from our program. It's unintended consequences. A number of times when people come up with innovations, or when we're thinking of things that are positive, we tend not to look at the other side of the equation. And this one, I want just to bring out some of the things. When you're thinking of the green transition, a big part is when you're thinking of batteries, a lot of the metals that we use are rare metals. And with time, I think a number of countries are coming to the realization that it might become an issue in terms of, because they're rare, so there are 2 effects. One is it will become very competitive. And so those things we are transitioning to might be too expensive and hinder access to many people. But the second side is the countries where these things are being mined, a lot is happening on the ground. There are issues about the water that is being needed to actually make these things happen. And so part of the things we say, even as you're thinking through what skills you need, what policies do you need to innovate on, I challenge you to think of the second order problems that may occur. So beyond just thinking of how do we bring solar to people's homes, think through what materials are being used. Are they easy to find? Where are they coming from? When you start thinking of such things, that's how you start seeing different types of opportunity. I think because this transition is still happening now, everyone is still trying to figure it out. I see it as an opportunity as we start asking the deeper questions. I think that's where the innovation will come in. I think that's where policy that matters for the context of Africa will come in. A number of these minerals are being gotten from our continent. So we need to start being aware. And so I want to challenge the young people to start thinking of these broader issues. A lot of times we think from a perspective of where we are, but my challenge is to start thinking macro because these things will affect us. The same rural areas you want to give access might again not gain access because of affordability, or they might be displaced because of the mining that will happen there. And so I challenge you to start thinking from that frame. The second frame is globally, a number of failures have happened. And I think a very good way to learn or rather see opportunities is first see where didn't it work as a start. So I'll just give quick stories, 5 examples of things that didn't work as they were supposed to. And as a continent, as Nigeria, and me from speaking from Kenya, we need to start thinking about. One, there's a story about when Spain was trying to transition, they did it a lot on subsidies. So when they are encouraging moving to solar, they were subsidizing the prices of things. So be it the panels, be it the batteries. Then after a while, the cost of subsidies became too high. And the effect is when the government went around and overturned the subsidies, suddenly it became too expensive. So the number of people who had already transitioned, you already had a number in your head, and suddenly that number increases by 50% to 100% because there are no more subsidies. It became a problem. So one of the things to think about is, even as you're doing these transitions, a lot depends on subsidies. But we need to start thinking of when the subsidies stop, what next? And so planning before it becomes a problem would be good. Second example is in California. There's a time they were trying to transition from, using the grid, transitioning into wind and solar fully. Now, the issue was they had a high demand for power, and the transition could not meet that demand. So those in engineering understand what I mean by base load. So they couldn't cater for the amount of energy required. And so the transition, the forceful transition did not work because they had higher demands than they thought. And so this is also a lesson. As we are speaking of these things, part of the things we need to start learning or start researching as areas of opportunity is to understand such nuances, that even as we transition, we make sure that we are not overloading everything to the green transition, to actually do measure what is required as countries so that the transition doesn't work, to fault us, doesn't work against us. So that's the other one. Third one is from South Africa. Them is a different issue. As they were doing the transitions, their systems were not ready. So their grid lines were not updated, they were not upgraded. And so while they were doing the transition, they were getting a lot of faults in their lines. And so what was to be a good thing became a bad thing because of a lot of blackouts happening, because they were not ready for that. So this is another thing when you're doing your research or you're thinking about policy, there are a number of things to start thinking about our grids and how do we manage them, how do we upgrade them, how do we bring more microgrids to the different parts of our countries so that even as you're transitioning, we're able to cater for those things. The fourth example is on rising costs of materials. So a while back in the UK, they were trying to do more on offshore wind as their way to transition into green. But as they were doing that, the prices of those equipment needed to do that was also increasing. And so they were in a fix where they were doing a lot of transitions, but the cost kept going higher. So something that was supposed to reduce the cost of energy was actually working against them. So this is another point to be aware. Here I'm just saying things to be aware as you're thinking about the transition, because to me, when you're seeing failures, it's an opportunity so that we do it well as a continent, as countries. And then the last one is the awareness of consumer costs can actually go high. At times, transitions can become more expensive than they were before. And in Germany, there was such a case. And even it's similar to what happened in Spain, that the people who were supposed to transition, it becomes more expensive to go green than not to go green. And so this is also another point of caution, so that we do not push green and then make it unaffordable. Clean energy is needed. That's what I'm saying. But what I'm adding is we need to be aware of things that have failed before, so that even as you're transitioning into clean, we start looking at those different things. So these 5 areas are very interesting things to look at, even as you think it through the different policies or the different skills you need to get, or the different innovations we can come up with. And then lastly, where I think there's great opportunity, and Jennifer really hinted at this a lot, as a continent, it's just powering food systems. We are a growing continent. We are expected to have the highest number of people. And the more people we have, it means more people need to be eating. A disturbing statistic is we have 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land, yet we are still net food importers. So for me, I see big opportunity in that. However, food systems by themselves use a lot of energy. And to even get to the point where we are using that 60%, we actually need to put more energy into our food systems. Now, the problem is currently our food systems do not use renewable sources. We're using a lot of fossil fuels in our food system. So what that means, even as we increase production in our food system, if we continue the way we are, we will use more fossil fuels in that food system, and hence emit more CO2 in the food system. And when I'm talking about food system, I'm talking through the production side, the logistics, storage, all the way to the markets. That's the entire food system. Energy is required to improve our food systems. And for me, I see an opportunity when we say, where can we start? It's the productive use of energy in our food systems. What that means is, how can we bring more energy when you're farming? So that could be solar powered irrigation. That could be greenhouses that are solar powered. How do we bring renewable energy in our logistics? Be it cold storage, in our value addition, in drying, all those things. If we can find ways to bring renewable energy, we solve a number of problems. For one, we increase the food in our continent. We have the capacity, we have the land, we have the climate required, but we need more energy in that system. So that's one. Two, we reduce the emissions that we're bringing into the system itself. And for me, the third one, the big one, is we create new opportunities. I see this gap as a very big opportunity. And a big thing we're currently doing, and it's something we are collaborating with CADEF during this year. We're running a challenge. Some of the incubatees who are currently in our program, our Green Labs program, in collaboration with CADEF, we're trying to solve this specific problem. How do we bring more energy into the food system? And specifically, how do we bring clean energy into the food system? For us, I see this as a big opportunity. So if I was to anchor everyone into one place where I think it's a great opportunity, I'd say figuring out the food systems for our continent is a great opportunity for the women and youth of our continent to just start engaging in, whether it's from coming up with innovations, whether it's skilling yourself in terms of learning new skills in school, whether it's influencing the policies that are coming up in the sector. Food systems and bringing clean energy into it is a great opportunity. With that, here is a bit of us. Quick summary, our big mission as Jacobs Ladder Africa is to activate 30 million jobs in the green economy. Our contact details are there. I think I will hand over to Rukwe. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you so much for that insight, and especially for spotlighting how we can power food systems with clean energy, as well as the Green Labs incubation program. At this point, I think it's very important to say that you should connect with us via social media handles. The link will be in the chat box, and you will get to learn more about the Green Labs program as well as other initiatives by the Consumer Advocacy and Empowerment Foundation. Thank you so much to our speakers. We have another poll that will be up on the screen in a few seconds. Kindly engage and leave your thoughts with us. Thank you. Okay. We can keep our answers coming. While this is going on, we can see some questions in the chat box. If you have more questions, you can keep dropping them there. We are going to be having a Q&A session right after now. Thank you. Okay, I think we can have the first question while the answers are coming in. This question is for Jennifer. Give me a minute while I pull that up. Oh, I can't find that right now. Okay, this is for Ava. It says, thanks for your great presentation. You noted that training improves both entry and retention. Please, can you share any specific retention strategies built into the Open Africa program? Secondly, beyond the technical skills, what business skills have proven most effective in helping women move from entry-level roles to management? Eva, thank you.
Yeah, happy to jump in and answer that question. Specifically for Open Africa Power. It's a project that SC for All co-manages with Enel Foundation. We have almost 600 alumni. And we recruit from individuals who are already in the energy sector. So this isn't necessarily like a recent graduate. It's more of like I'm entry level or I'm mid-level and I'm looking to continue and further my career. And so at that point, right, you're looking purely at sort of retention and how you can keep people in. So we do a lot of business skills, regulatory skills, technical, financial, and there's also an opportunity to, for part of the cohort to travel to Italy and to do some networking and some site visits. And so really, when you're building a network, when you're building a community, I think that that's one really important part of retention. You'd be entering into, if it's Open Africa Power, something that interests you, you'd be entering into a community of over 600 alumni, who can then be peers, mentors, maybe job opportunities in the future. So really looking at, how we can leverage that network and then provide skills and knowledge that continue to grow in your career. So assuming that you're already coming in with a pretty high level of knowledge, maybe not 10 years, but maybe 3 years or something like this, right? So and then how can we support your goals better from there? As for some of the, I think you said business skills that are helpful to know for women entrepreneurs, financial literacy, so just even being able to do things with money. How do you write in cash checks? How do you do taxes? How do you do these kind of things that seem, simple, but actually have a lot of, regulations around them? budgeting, knowing how to not only write a budget, but also how to maintain a budget and monitor your activities against it. I think grant writing and, grant making are also extremely important skills to have. I know these sound like a lot of, I think, they're not a surprise because they're really foundational skills. But they're also really foundational skills that not a lot of people have perfected. So I think they're worth repeating. So yeah, that financial literacy, that budgeting piece, grant writing, really bringing those skills sort of together, and being able to sort of monitor against things like your budget and your grants. Um, yeah, and I'm not sure if the other speakers have anything that they'd like to add on that point, as I know we're running out of time, so I kept it a bit quick.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ava. The other questions for other speakers. So Jennifer, this is for you. It says, can we have a link of those innovators so that we can engage them in finding solutions to some of the problems mentioned in our society?
Oh yeah, sure, I can do that. I will just drop them on the general chat so that we can just pick them up from there. Probably also share maybe their website or something. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And for Kevin, it says, thank you so much for such an insightful session. As a youth who is interested in clean energy, but lacking the money and the experience, plus it seems like there's a lot of options to consider. What then is the first realistic step I can take to get involved?
Okay, I think the answer to that question is it's on that part of that. There's a lot of options, but my response is very, I'd say just start. The thing with where you are and where you're seeing many options, it's not yet clear, but trying to figure out when you're outside, you'll never really move. So for me, it's pick one, just start, then learn from that, then know what next. Because it's still early for you to even know here's where to start. So rather than pick for you, start here. For me, I'd say the one that is accessible to you, start there, then learn from there and see what's next. Because I think the more you engage, the more new doors open, the more new opportunities you start seeing. And then the more you become narrowed and focused on here's where I want to go. So I just say, just start.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Kevin says, just start. That's the first step. Every other step comes afterwards. There's another question on the chat box for you, Kevin. And it says, can alternative materials be used to encourage production and acceptance by all, especially at the deep fields?
I think I need to understand that question better. Can alternative materials
Be used to encourage production and acceptance by all, especially at the deep fields? I'm thinking, Aishatu Yakubu, if you're here, if you're still here, you can unmute and better ask your question. Okay, while we are waiting for her, I'll share the poll results with us. Which insight from today's session do you think will influence your next steps the most? 29% of our audience think that learning how women and youth are creating innovative clean energy solutions will inspire them to take action in tech or entrepreneurship. 38% of our audience say that understanding the skills and opportunities needed for the green jobs for tomorrow will motivate them to prepare for the workforce. And 33% of our audience say that realizing the importance of amplifying voices in climate governance will encourage them to engage in advocacy and decision making. Overall, I think it's really amazing to know that we learned a lot during the session and we have action points that we will be working on even beyond the session. Thank you. Aishatu Yakubu, are you here now?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, and thank you to all the speakers. It has really been an engaging and educative one. Mr. Kevin, I was just curious on at a point where you mentioned some materials that were going to be used and the availability of those materials to be utilized in one of your discussions there. So is it you had it in bracket, maybe lithium or some other ones that you mentioned. So I was thinking, if we want to get down to the grassroots and have more people get to know about these things because they need it more actually than us. Because I was thinking, is there an alternative material that could be used so that we can have mass production of those things, and then the people over there can utilize it, and then it will be a very good one with a large scale of people now keen into the clean energy issues. I hope you understand my question now. Thank you.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Thank you for that. So what I was bringing up was just that consciousness of the current materials that we're using are rare earth materials. So it's more of a challenge to the scientists. It's more a challenge to the engineers. It's more a challenge to, the people in school, because it's so easy to say to go to school to get a degree. But I'm challenging young people to go to school to solve problems. And so for me, I was highlighting that this is a problem that will come. And so the challenge is because there are many innovations that are coming up in the space. And for us to be part of those people thinking through what kinds of innovations can come in the space. There's a gentleman, I think in Zimbabwe, who's designed a car that runs without solar, runs without, like, there are people who are designing different kind of things, different kind of solutions. And mine is posing that maybe we should also start thinking in that lens of what other things can be brought to the table. My challenge is, it's not saying leave these materials. It's just saying we need to start thinking of other materials, more sustainable materials along the way. So I might not have the answer saying, let's use this material, but it's more a challenge to the people in research, the people in the sciences, in the chemistry, to start figuring out those things. So for me, I was posing it more as a challenge. Think through this as a consequence. Does that answer?
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you so much, Aishatu. As we
Yes,
wrap
it
up
does.
today's
Thank you.
conversation, thank you. As we wrap up today's conversation, a few important ideas stand out. First, when we talk about representation, it cannot just be symbolic. Women and the youth must not only be present in conversations about clean energy, but they must be actively involved in shaping decisions, policies, and even solutions. Second, innovation works best when it reflects real life, because the most effective clean energy solutions are those designed around our everyday realities. And finally, preparing the next generation for green jobs requires intentional efforts. We must invest in the right skills, we must create clear entry pathways, and we must build systems that support long-term growth. The future of clean energy depends not only on technology, but on the people who will drive it forward. And the people I'm referring to here is you, my audience. Before we conclude, I would like to encourage everyone to visit our distributed energy resources platform at der.cadefng.org. The link will be dropped in the chat box. The DER platform is a one-stop shop to help you understand and access simple, trusted, and sustainable renewable energy solutions. On the platform, you can access valuable renewable energy resources and tools designed to support informed energy decisions. We also encourage you to try out the solar calculator available on the website. It is a very helpful tool for households who want to estimate their energy consumption and better understand their solar energy needs. In view of the global conversations around data privacy, Consumer Advocacy and Empowerment Foundation has released a video podcast themed Protecting Consumers in a Data-Driven World. Believe me when I say it is a must watch. The YouTube link to the podcast is also available in the chat box. Kindly click on it, learn, like, repost, comment your views, and most importantly, don't forget to subscribe. We are also gearing up for the World Consumer Rights Day in March, where we'll be reaching out to every one of you with relevant details of that event. So please always check your inboxes for email notifications. Finally, on behalf of Consumer Advocacy and Empowerment Foundation, CADEF, I sincerely thank our speakers, Ava Strasser, Jennifer Anya, and Kevin Okwako. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. And to you, our audience, every one of you who made out time to join us today, we say a very big thank you. We know that the session has been a very impactful one for you, and we look forward to hearing from you shortly as to what you're doing or what you will be doing with the action points. Let us continue building a clean energy transition that is inclusive, innovative, and just. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Everyone.